I would actually like to respond to a statement by Mr. Donda that I was endorsed by the Brookline Police Union, which is true. Tom McGuire was impressed by the fact that I listened. Apparently people don't listen much in the town. And he said, Bernard, I want to get my union to endorse you. I was running for a select board for the first time at that time. And I said, if you want to do that, that's fine. And they did. And I have no problem with that endorsement, and you shouldn't either.
From what I've seen, there's a lot of confirmation bias going on for the folks who don't support these proposals. And, they've been listening to our task force meeting for weeks and months, so they've heard everything. Again, the conversation now needs to happen in a different room than this Zoom room. And it's a political conversation.
Let me just say to everyone out there who's sending in emails about Brookline and our police department, no, it is not perfect, but don't let the illusion of perfection blind you to the very good that we have here in Brookline.
And my experience with Brookline and my son's experience in Brookline has been absolutely horrible, right? So I call it now lately, living Black in Brookline, right? And that's hard, right? Especially when you have 6 sons that you have to be afraid for because of the police. The first year we moved to Brookline, my son was simply walking down the street with a hoodie on, and the police followed him around. That's never okay, right? So then I had to tell my son, don't wear a hoodie, don't walk in Brookline at night. That's not okay. My next son, Brookline high school student, he's just walking his white friend home one day from school. Brookline police officer tells him, don't walk my daughter home from school. That's not okay.
I feel scared for my life living in Brookline, and my kids do. Things need to improve for Black people. The 15-year-old Black kid that was coming from school and was stopped by a police officer without any probable cause, and decided to search the kid's bag. It shouldn't be. Kids should be allowed to walk from school to their home without any of these police interactions.
Especially as an Asian American, I'm very much taken aback. I'm pissed off right now. We see, Asian Americans drivers being ticketed more often than anybody else. Okay, does that mean I have to pay more as an Asian American for driving around Brookline? Whereas other people, this is disproportionality. This is discrimination.
Another Black Town meeting member, myself, and an East Indian resident were criticized similarly approximately a year ago because we dared come to the defense of a Black teenager who had falsely been arrested by the Brookline police and tried to file a citizen's complaint against them.
I saw a post from the Brookline Police Union, and it was that was brought to all of our attention. And frankly, it was very disturbing. There's a town meeting member who also happens to serve as an executive in the Educators Union, who very simply, in a very short email, just voiced his support for one of the amendments. And for that, his name and likeness were put up on the Brookline Police Union website. And it was told that he wants to hurt the community and lay off minority police officers. Don't be like him.
The installation of the banner on Town Hall grounds is also inseparable from our support for the efforts undertaken by the Select Board and the Brookline Police Department to address problems highlighted by the work of the Black Lives Matter movement that existed and may continue to exist in the Brookline Police Department and elsewhere. Look, let me be clear, we are not perfect, but residents of Brookline should know that the town of Brookline and the Brookline Police Department are years ahead of the problems reported in the national media, and that we are continuing our march towards a more perfect union. Please give us credit for that.
The crisis that has come to a head at the national level is the result of inaction, and worse at the local level. Look at the retaliation against Gerald Alston, officers Pilot and Zerai Musgin, who had the courage to report racist conduct in the departments. They were ousted while those committing the bad acts kept their jobs and were even promoted.
I'm asking you on behalf of the community that is here to act on a motion to reverse your vote.
We have already taken our vote.
I will ask then, Nancy Heller, do you vote to reverse it? Do you reverse your vote?
Why not? We have taken our vote.
Bernard Green, do you reverse your vote?
Okay.
And then I also reported on something where an off-duty officer intimidated a group of students of color, and the ex-wife of the officer was in the car and started hurling racial epithets at the students. And we reported on that, but it was a case of the students didn't want to say anything, and their social worker at the high school for Steps to Success contacted me instead of the police. So coming to the police is so intimidating. I was on the receiving end of what I believe was some police misconduct. Basically what happened was I rented an office, and the person who was in the office next to it thought that he was going to rent it, and I paid $3,000, and I made an agreement with the landlord, and I'm a man in khakis and a dress shirt with a tape measure measuring out this new office. And the person next door told me to leave. I didn't want to leave because I paid $3,000 to be there. And it was about 4 doors down from the police station, and about 7 or 8 police officers ran in and dragged me out. They didn't drag me, but they physically intimidated me. And when I tried to call the town commissioner, a town administrator, they told me they would smash my phone if I didn't put it in my pocket. And I was on the street and they were around me, and I don't think they were gonna strike me, but I was scared. And I was also embarrassed. And I also thought that someone might drive by that could be one of my clients or something. To go to the police was difficult. And the way the process played out, in both these instances, it was just slow played for so long that in the end, I just wanted it to go away. And in the end, these students just wanted their situation to go away.
While brandishing the blue thin line iconography in the background, a symbol of hate, Police Union President Michael Keaveney and Officer Casey Hatchett made inflammatory comments against Dr. Raul Fernandez simply because he called for accountability in the police department.
I want to talk about kind of a difficult issue, but one that I think I have an obligation to discuss. And that is the recent police kerfuffle here in Brookline. So let me start by saying, having grown up as an adolescent in Philadelphia, when Frank Rizzo was police commissioner, it would be very easy for me to assume that all police are evil. But that assumption wouldn't be any more justified than any of a large number of assumptions that have been made and applied to Black people, Muslims, Jews, Irish, women, etc. Unfortunately, some people locally use similar assumptions to argue that racist acts occurring in faraway places or even in nearby Boston must mean that our Brookline Police Department is a racist department. Of course, there are problems that we need to fix, including racial bias in the police department, like any institution in this society. But I'm urging people to keep those problems in perspective. Is the Brookline Police Department perfect? Of course not, but it's damn good.
Shortly after their disgusting and abominable incitements, Dr. Fernandez began to receive death threats.
Less than 24 hours after their statements, a post appeared on a local, in Massachusetts, racist blog, which twisted my words as a way to encourage the worst of humanity to respond. They did, with hateful comments on the blog post, of course, and racial insults like spick, wetback, beaner, and others which I won't repeat, and issuing threats like the one about burning my house down with my family inside. These are supporters of the police department. Of course, then came the emails, direct messages, and phone calls to my phone, all hate-filled, laced with profanity, and punctuated by support for police. Blue lives matter more than your life matters was one comment. What you may not know is that this is not the first time this has happened to me since I've been in office here in Brookline. I haven't spoken publicly about this kind of stuff before because I didn't want to give it this kind of oxygen. But I wanted to share it now for a couple of reasons. One, so that you understand that racism is real and that it is local. This idea about racism existing elsewhere but not here, you've got your head in the sand. It's naive. It's completely naive. It was less than 24 hours from when that union letter came out and those comments were made by those police union members before a local racist mob was harassing me online, and just one more day before the phone call started.
I'm going to pull you back to the question, though, which is what are some of the issues that PAX in 2021 is active around?
So the last few years, we've been involved in some very controversial issues, and on a lot of them, people have gotten much to what I call litmus test, and we've had people that overreact, that say, what's happened to PAX? And then comes a lot of racial and police stuff, and that's been the hottest issue for the last year, ever since actually the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis. And that's been a fascinating lesson in politics in general. And by the way, I not only have a law degree, but I got a master's in poli-sci. So on the race and police issues, what's happened is kind of ironic to me, is that a lot of very well-intentioned people that want to fight racism and are fighting racism have, I think, gone a little too far in terms of not particularly factual representations about Brookline and about exaggerating the problems in Brookline. And it's created quite a bit of strife, both in town meeting and in the community. And I think it's been bad for the community, because I think the people I'm talking about exaggerate how bad things are in Brookline.
My personal belief is that the Brookline Police Department is a very good department, but not perfect. The presumption of the Police Reforms Committee is that the Brookline Police Department is a very good department in all areas of current concerns with policing nationally.
There's two people who started on the other committee who openly criticized the other committee.
As a member of the Reform Committee, I witnessed the Select Board Chair mock the chokehold, then rush the ban as in the chokehold ban as a quote easy win for his own political gain. He refused to have the full committee hear from complainants, citing that they were not vetted, quote vetted, and not sure if their stories are quote reliable. Chair Green instructed Reform Committee members to place certain items at the back of the report, quote, in order to make it harder for some people to say this is just PR for the police. The credibility of the Reform Committee report is flawed.
See if there are ways in which, the report's enthusiasm for the great programs we have here in Brookline and the great job the police does with respect to those programs causes a sort of over exuberance. I mean, I found a few places where I think we need to tone it down, and even though great work is being done, we don't want to appear to be sort of PRing some of this stuff.
I do not support many parts of the Police Reform Committee report. Soon after I joined the Police Reform Committee, I learned that Brookline Police Union endorsed you, Bernard, for your election. This made me think that you would be biased towards the police. I felt that you owe them a debt. I also see it's a conflict of interest. As weeks and months of the committee's work went on, I saw it play out at every turn.
The Reform Committee has mostly focused on defending policies and practices, approaching problems the same old way, getting reports and opinions from the usual folks, including paying the former police chief whose practices are being questioned, the outrageous amount of $106,000.
And for everybody that spoke tonight that's supporting the Reform Committee, I want to give lived experience. I'm a person of color. You can hear my accent. I'm from the marginalized community. A lot of my friends, 90% I was here at Brookline Housing Residence, and none of them, just like myself, were supported the Reform Committee. Some of the officers that participated in the Reform Committee were actually paid to do that. So now we have officers paid OTs to recommend favorable recommendations that favors them. It bothers me. There's something unethical about that, but just points to the bias.
That I think, unfortunately, this gets back to confirmation bias, which I worry is something that the task force that really had throughout many of its meetings.
I'll just note with respect to presumption. I mean, in the previous presentation, and I don't. The chair mentioned that the Reform Committee started with a presumption that we have a very good police department. And I wonder if you would also fault them for that presumption, as
My presumption, I think, is uniformly agreed to in this town as well as throughout the Commonwealth. But that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
Most people in Brookline, including Black people, have very little contact with the police. So their view of the Brookline Police Department is going to be influenced by a lot of other things outside of Brookline. What they see on the cable news daily.
But or assumption.
Pardon me?
Is that fact or assumption?
What?
That Black people don't have much connection to the police.
Well, that's assumption. I haven't done any research on that. But
okay.
People in general go through their lives and see the cop walking down the street, but have little reason to interact with them or get to know them. So
just think that's an assumption. And
I
just want to make clear that
I said it was an assumption.
Well,
and of course, it has to be an assumption.
Okay, I'm just wanting to make it clear because then you went on to say people don't have those things. So I'm just making clear whether you're speaking fact or assumption as a personal reference, as opposed to
assumption
a general reference.
And maybe a question as to whether that influences or would influence how people respond to a survey. I don't know. I just raised the question.
We actually do have survey evidence on that, and it's in the report. So most African Americans in Brookline who took the survey, but not most people of other races, reported a recent contact with the police.
I listened to reform meetings and I heard that residents are upset about things that happen elsewhere. They discussed our questionable assumptions and mentioned Philando Castillo. So let's talk about Philando. Lauderdale is a suburb of Minneapolis, as Brookline is a suburb of Boston. Like Brookline, Lauderdale is considered one of the best places to live in its state. The Lauderdale website looks just like the BPD's. Officer Yanez stands in front of a monument that reads, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Officer Yanez met with a citizen sustainability group and gave them bike safety tips. Officer Yanez had implicit bias training. He played basketball with kids. The department hired a new use of force instructor. Yanez's training was modern and up to date. And from inches away, he fired 7 shots into Philando Castillo's chest and into a vehicle with another adult and a 4-year-old child. The police chief said it was the first officer-involved shooting in at least 30 years. Just a few years ago, a Brookline officer shot a man in his own home. They hospitalized another man using less lethal force. Recently, an off-duty cop in a fit of road rage pulled his gun in the middle of Route 9 and held 2 men at gunpoint. A Brookline officer drew his weapon on a driver as parents walked by with their children on the way to school. They drew their weapon on Jamar Payne, who was in a wheelchair and was doing nothing wrong. Something has only never happened until it happens. The reason our police have implicit bias training is because the victim in a racial profiling claim we paid $157,000 for stipulated that training as a condition of settlement. He is a middle-aged Black man. A Brookline cop made lay face down on the asphalt while the cop put his boot on the man's neck and shoulders and pressed down. He sought medical attention after, and yes, I believe the victim. Those are his details.
You have 30 seconds.
We have the right to meaningful oversight of the police, which the Select Board has never provided. Diversity Commissioner Dwayne Tyndall said that given the amount of racial profiling done by the BPD, someone was going to get shot. And then you're all going to throw up your hands and say, "We didn't know." But you can't say that anymore. Not a single sitting Select Board member will be able to say you didn't know. You've been told over and over. Now you're going to show us if you care.
There virtually is no police oversight. The police commissioner, Bernard Green, has failed to do his job. In my conversation with the former chief, Dan O'Leary, in November, I asked him to give me a ballpark of how many times the Select Board met with him on the topic of oversight, and the chief could not give me an answer. The chair is clearly incapable of doing his job as police commissioner. Vote him out. We have plenty of capable
You're getting up against the line, Jonathan.
I'm sorry, you're gonna rush me again? My time's
No, I'm saying you're getting up against the line. Be careful about personal attacks.
This is not a personal attack. This is how many people feel. This is criticism against you, Mr. Chair, your inability to do your job well. And clearly you're showing it right now. Just like the choke comments you made several months ago. You are unable. You rushed me when my father was in a hospital and I was trying to speak. You rushed me to speak faster, even though I was getting off the phone with the doctor. Not only do you show inhumane ability to connect with people, you are despicable.
Okay, continue.
Okay?
Make a fool of
That was
yourself.
personal.
Yeah, make a fool of yourself. Go ahead.
Well, you're the one who's made a fool of yourself by making joke comments and by taking people out of the line and not actually listening to people and making fun of people. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are, Bernard Green? You must be voted out because you are incapable of doing your job.
Okay.
What kind of black man are you? Beyond black and white, you are despicable.
Jonathan.
You must be voted out.
Okay, Jonathan,
That
you've had
was
your say.
personal.
Okay, and we know where you're coming from.
Okay, you know, I'm very clear.
Okay, next, Mr. O'Neill.
And many people across this town feel the same way, the same exact way that I do.
Okay, good.